What is the law? For something that is a daily reality that affects us in nearly every aspect of our lives, it's not exactly something that we give a lot of thought to. For a lot of people, the law is just something that is, in the same way as that water is just something that is to a fish. A fish cannot know how wet water is, because it has lived its entire life immersed in it. In the same way, it is easy for people, immersed in the law for their entire lives, to not consider the fundamental nature of the law. When you get right down to it, what is the law supposed to do? What is its purpose? And how do we know when the law deviates from that purpose? Hello Internet, my name is John, and this is For Liberty. Today we're going to talk about The Law by Frédéric Bastiat, French politician, economist, and author. Bastiat published The Law in the year of his death in 1850, 2 years after the French Revolution of 1848. In the shadow of the bad behavior of the new French government, Bastiat set to write his most enduring work. He detailed, very simply, the purpose of the law, and how it is perverted from that purpose. He details the legal plunder that he saw happening around him, and this is the same legal plunder that we can see happening around us today. By the way, this is one of the books I recommend to gain an understanding of the state of political thought in a time period different than our own, in this case mid-19th century France. In the same way as that it is hard for fish to understand water, so too is it difficult for people to understand what is going on in the present, without having an understanding of what has happened in the past. Reading works like this enable us to see today's political dialogue with greater clarity, because the issues that confront us today are the very same fundamental issues that confronted people hundreds of years ago. Yep, we are still arguing about the same issues that people were arguing about in 1850, and before that as well. Here are a couple of the opening paragraphs from The Law by Bastiat. Life, faculties, production. In other words, individuality, liberty, property. This is man. And in spite of the cunning of artful political leaders, these three gifts precede all human legislation and are superior to it. Life, liberty, and property do not exist because men have made laws. On the contrary, it was the fact that life, liberty, and property existed beforehand that caused men to make laws in the first place. What, then, is law? It is the collective organization of the individual right to lawful defense. Each of us has a natural right to defend his person, his liberty, and his property. These are the three basic requirements of life, and the preservation of any one of them is completely dependent upon the preservation of the other two. If every person has a right to defend, even by force, his person, his liberty, and his property, then it follows that a group of men have the right to organize and support a common force to protect these rights constantly. Thus, the principle of collective right, its reason for existing, its lawfulness, is based on individual right. And the common force that protects this collective right cannot logically have any other purpose or any other mission than that for which it acts as a substitute. Thus, since an individual cannot lawfully use force against the person, liberty, or property of another individual, then the common force, for the same reason, cannot lawfully be used to destroy the person, liberty, or property of individuals or groups. The law is the organization of the natural right of lawful defense. It is the substitution of a common force for individual forces, and this common force is to do only what the individual forces have a natural and lawful right to do, to protect persons, liberties, and properties. If a nation were founded on this basis, it seems to me that order would prevail among the people, in thought as well as in deed. It seems to me that such a nation would have the most simple, easy to accept, economical, limited, non-oppressive, just, and enduring government imaginable, whatever its political form might be. Under such an administration, everyone would understand that he possessed all the privileges as well as all the responsibilities of his existence. No one would have any argument with government, provided that his person was respected, his labor was free, and the fruits of his labor were protected against all unjust attack. When successful, we would not have to thank the state for our success, and conversely, when unsuccessful, we would no more think of blaming the state for our misfortune than would the farmers blame the state because of hail or frost. But, unfortunately, law by no means confines itself to its proper functions, and when it has exceeded its proper functions, it has not done so merely in some inconsequential and debatable matters. The law has been used to destroy its own objective. It has been applied to annihilating the justice that it was supposed to maintain, to limiting and destroying rights which its real purpose was to respect. The law has placed the collective force at the disposal of the unscrupulous, who wish, without risk, to exploit the person, liberty, and property of others. It has converted plunder into a right in order to protect plunder, and it has converted lawful defense into a crime in order to punish lawful defense. Self-preservation and self-development are common aspirations among all people, but there is also another tendency that is common among people. When they can, they wish to live and prosper at the expense of others. This is no rash accusation, nor does it come from a gloomy and uncharitable spirit. The annals of history bear witness to the truth of it. The incessant wars, mass migrations, religious persecutions, universal slavery, dishonesty in commerce, and monopolies. This fatal desire has its origin in the very nature of man, in that primitive, universal, and insuppressible instinct that impels him to satisfy his desires with the least possible pain. Man can live and satisfy his wants only by labor, by the application of his faculties to natural resources. This process is the origin of property. But it is also true that a man may live and satisfy his wants by seizing and consuming the products of the labor of others. This process is the origin of plunder. Now, since man is naturally inclined to avoid pain, and since labor is pain in itself, it follows that men will resort to plunder whenever plunder is easier than work. When, then, does plunder stop? It stops when it becomes more painful and more dangerous than labor. It is evident, then, that the proper purpose of law is to use the power of its collective force to stop this fatal tendency to plunder instead of to work. All the measures of the law should protect property and punish plunder. And I really want to keep reading. Bastiat goes into more about how this perversion of the law has been accomplished, defines plunder and how to spot it, makes some interesting observations of the United States at the time, makes clear how legalized plunder has gone by many names, and says a lot of other really quotable stuff. In particular, Bastiat shows how a certain idea that keeps getting introduced as a great leap forward is really just a tired idea that has been around forever. Bastiat's timeless work is within the public domain. There are plenty of places online you can find it, or you can check out the handy link in the description. It's free, it can be read in one evening, and I highly recommend it. Go to, it is well worth your time. Read The Law by Bastiat in order to understand the purpose and function of the law. So have you read The Law by Bastiat? If so, what did you think of it? Comment below and let me know. And click here to see more for liberty. Thank you for watching.